It has been a while since we last spoke together. It has been quite the year for me, especially the past month or two. You can probably tell how stressed I am based on some new company on my face right now. But yeah, I've just been busy. I've been lacking motivation. All sort of things happening. And I think for most Nintendo fans, we're kind of just waiting for Switch 2, right? There isn't really that much to cover at the moment. Not really much Xenoblade news. The few that have happened, I will mention later on. But yeah, just not much happening. So there hasn't really been much reason for me to come on here. But today's a special day. Today is an exception. Because while I was happily enjoying The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, I realized something. It's about to be October. And what does that mean? October 1st? Tetsuya Takahashi would want me to know. It's Monolith Soft's 25th anniversary. I don't have anything special plans. There's no big video essay or anything. It's just me talking to you. So hopefully that's okay. I just thought it'd be a good excuse to touch on a few topics, especially just based on reflecting. But before we get into that, I just want to thank all y'all for supporting my Xenoblade 2 3-hour video essay, The Subtle Misunderstood Brilliance of Xenoblade 2, that has reached 50,000. 50K! I don't know when that happens, but I really appreciate everybody for checking that out. Right now, I'm just gonna kind of separate this video into 3 segments. The first one just being how the community has changed. This is something I've been reflecting on quite a bit lately. I don't think we as a Xenoblade community really appreciate the state that it's in as much as we should. A lot of Xenoblade fans, they started with Xenoblade 2 on the Switch, or maybe they started with really any of the Switch games, right? The point being is that they're very new. They're newcomers to the franchise. They have not been fans for that long. But Xenoblade has existed since 2010 in Japan, right? It has been has been quite a bit. They might complain about all the discourse, certain sections of the fan base being annoying. I mean, that's always going to happen, right? Every fan base, there's going to be those bad apples. There's going to be those contrarians. There's always going to be annoying discourse on the internet. This is something we should all know, right? But when it comes to Xenoblade, today the community is way better than it's ever been, especially before Xenoblade 3. I think Xenoblade 3 does not get enough credit in terms of how it turned the tides, how it united the community in ways that I couldn't even imagine. Before Xenoblade 3 was announced, I was not expecting, I don't think most of us was expecting a game that combined many elements of 1 and 2. And because it did that, Xenoblade 1 fans, Xenoblade 2 fans, they might have had their differences, right? All that discourse, but they could at least unite and say, hey, you know what? We're all looking forward to this new game. I have been a Xenoblade fan since day 1 of its North American release, so back in 2012. And so I've seen how the community has grown. I've seen how the community, how their opinions have changed and how extreme they can be at certain points in time. Here's the biggest way I could put it. I don't feel as though when I go on the Xenoblade subreddit or I look up Xenoblade on Twitter, I don't feel like it's a guarantee I'll be annoyed. That speaks volumes, okay? Because those are the 2 of the places where you should expect that. But now I'm going in those places and yeah, maybe I will be annoyed, but it's not a guarantee. Whereas back then, it was a guarantee. It was a guarantee to see all this toxic discourse screaming about whatever the newest Xenoblade game is. Because that's the thing, too, is that, Xenoblade X right now is heralded as this beloved game that should definitely come back. And it's very stupid that it hasn't come back yet. What are they waiting for? We all want it. We were all screaming for it. But as I did cover in my Xenoblade series retrospective back in 2020, by the way, yikes, many people have forgotten. Many people weren't even there. Xenoblade X also got a lot of divisive feedback from Xenoblade fans, much like Xenoblade 2. It's almost like revisionist history, the way people talk about Xenoblade X, just because it's so much of a desired port or remaster. The narrative has really changed on that game, and I kind of want to make a video maybe when it does get announced, I'll do it around that time. I want to make a video about that kind of revisionist history and how that shouldn't slide. In fact, that retrospective I just mentioned, like, I'll be honest, I don't look back at it too fondly. Like, it was definitely emotionally charged. I wore my heart on my sleeve, to put it in a polite way. It was a lot. And I just feel like some people will go back to that video and they'll be confused. They'll probably think I'm like exaggerating, or maybe I'm lying. I just feel like if you were to watch that video today, you might be put off a little bit by how I'm speaking about the Xenoblade community. But the reason why I haven't remade that video or took it down, despite like my kind of cringe at it, the reason why I haven't done that is because I think it's important that it exists. Not important that I was the one to tell you that. Not important to try to like put myself on a pedestal, but in the sense that we as a community, I think it's important to acknowledge our past. I think it's important to not have that revisionist history. I think it's important to look back and say, hey, yeah, that is how people truly felt. Like, it wasn't just me. If you go in the comments, a lot of people are agreeing with me. A lot of people are saying, hey, I'm glad someone finally said this. I'm going to keep that video the way it is, and I'm still going to plug it. I'm still going to say, hey, that is... it's not my favorite, but that's still something that maybe you should watch. Like, maybe if you're a newer Xenoblade fan and you didn't know, maybe you were unaware of all the discourse following Xenoblade 1. If you didn't know all that, I think you should check it out, because it just kind of... Well, there's two reasons. The first being, like how I all started this, I just want people to like not take the community for granted, because I'll see people complaining about stuff that happens, certain bad apples or just general discourse. Well, I'll tell you what, I prefer this way more over than how it used to be. And that brings me joy. Like, I'm not trying to rub it in. It brings me joy that we have gotten to this point. The second reason why I'm keeping that video there is not just to show our past and how we can learn from it. It's also showing a glimpse at our future. Xenoblade 4 will likely happen, and it will likely be quite different. In some way, it's going to be quite different. If you don't think that's going to cause some sort of noticeable, annoying discourse, then you have not learned anything from any of my videos. No, it will happen. That is definitely going to happen, especially since the original trilogy ended this, long, overarching storyline. I just feel like there's certain people just kind of like, maybe not explicitly, but they're going to want to believe that all this is better than whatever Xenoblade 4 is. There's going to be that nostalgia, there's going to be that contrarian represented there. And that sucks, but it will happen. And I just want you to know, we've already seen this shit. Let's not all be surprised. Let's not all just be like, oh, wow, a lot of people are not liking this, so there must be a problem with the game. Let's not, no. No. Let us not pretend like we have not gone through this before, okay? And we've come out of the other side feeling pretty damn good about all the games we've gotten, okay? Even if you don't like X, even if you don't like 2, doesn't matter, because all those games are really beloved. With Xenoblade 4, just prepare yourselves. Hopefully, we have learned to handle it better, and I especially hope, whether it's Xenoblade or many other franchises, when you have someone coming in for the first time, let's say Xenoblade 4 is coming out, they've always been interested in Xenoblade, and now that Xenoblade 4 is the newest game, and it's not like super directly connected to these 3 other games, now's the time, right? This is a great entry point. Let me hop in. Oh, actually, first, let me check the community. Let me see how they're feeling about it. Because, on paper, that's a great idea. And they go in the community, they see all those divisive takes, all those hot takes, all those voices screaming at you, and maybe they won't even play Xenoblade 4, and thus they won't become a Xenoblade fan at all. I have a great friend, who didn't play Xenoblade 2 for a long time. They even had another friend tell them that it wasn't, basically repeating all the discourse to them. Then they finally played Xenoblade 2 and they really enjoyed it. Imagine that. I know this streamer. I've been following this streamer for a long time. They played Xenoblade 1 on the Switch, They had not played Xenoblade 2 though yet, because they heard all this discourse about it, especially from Xenoblade 1 fans. So when they saw Xenoblade 1 come out on the Switch, it's like, okay, I'll play that one instead. And then finally they end up going back to Xenoblade 2, and they absolutely fall in love with it. And not just that, they're Twitch streamers, so there was like so many people coming in, so many Xenoblade 2 fans coming in, just showing so much support. They literally said, out of all the Xenoblade games, they got the most love and support from the Xenoblade 2 fans. And so it's just funny. They thought it was just like weird how they heard all this backlash about this game, but not only did they end up loving it, they also saw this outpouring of support from all these people on Twitch for streaming that game. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, I think a lot of us, hopefully, we do realize it is annoying. But for a lot of people, especially if they are newcomers, if they are interested in trying the series out for the first time, they are going to look to that community feedback. Even though they tell themselves, yeah, of course the internet's so negative, of course social media is toxic, of course Twitter sucks, they're still going to look at it. They're still going to look at it whenever they're considering playing this niche franchise, and they're going to see all those takes, and they're going to think to themselves, oh, the game must be bad. The game must suck. Something must be wrong with this game, so I'm not going to play it. So that's why I cover divisiveness, the community reactions. That's why it's so important for me to address very passionately. And I definitely don't think that those kind of reactions represents the average fan, right? I mean, there's so many other toxic communities, like Super Smash Brothers. That is one that's very known for being toxic over all the character reveals, right? But like, you shouldn't say that the average Smash fan's like that, right? No matter how loud and obnoxious it is, that's not something you should think. It's actually interesting because whenever I do see discourse nowadays for Xenoblade, it's usually about Xenoblade 3, like, oh, Future Redeemed was way better than the base game because, you know, it has all these like direct references like I thought Xenoblade 3 was going to have, all these direct connections, yada yada. And of course there's like, you know, people criticizing Xenoblade 3's villains, the story being underwhelming, stuff like that. It's not anywhere near the scrutiny that X and 2 got, but even with a game like Xenoblade 3 that directly, not in a harsh way, but it directly panders to the previous Xenoblade fans, the previous Xenoblade games, by borrowing all those elements, right? Even a game like that gets that kind of scrutiny by a certain subsection of people. But what I find funny, though, is there's been kind of like an attempted shift in the narrative. I say attempted because it's not that common, but I do see it where some people are kind of like acting like victims. Like the Xenoblade 2 fans are the antagonists. Yeah, they're the annoying part of the fan base. They're the ones hating on Xenoblade 3. And like, it just weirds me out. Because if you did know the history of the community, it's just kind of funny how you got to that conclusion. After everything that has happened, now we're trying to blame Xenoblade 2? You know, it's just funny. I'm not saying there isn't any annoying Xenoblade 2 fans. There's annoying and bitter people everywhere you look. Of course there are annoying fans, but it's just, you know, if you see that narrative going around, like, hopefully you understand that's like BS. Like, that's it's also weird how like the official Xenoblade 2 fan subreddit is now majority love for Xenoblade 2. Like, it's just how did this happen? How did we get to this point? That's what I'm talking about, man, about how the community has changed, how it's grown. How did we get to that point? I don't understand. And of course, you'll see people in there who complain about that. They'll air out their grievances, like, oh, why is it always Xenoblade 2 posts, or like, you know, this and that. And I get it. You don't want any of the games to be oversaturated on there. But I just think it's funny, man. Before I move on to the next segments, I just want to mention my favorite meme, because there's many memes posted about Xenoblade all over social media, especially on the subreddit, as I mentioned. My favorite meme, or at least one of my favorite memes, that I don't feel like is overused, is the 15 TP. If you don't get it, you will. You will if you play Xenoblade 3. That is a hilarious meme. I'm a big fan of that one. I love describing characters as 15. Did I say P or TP? Maybe I'm 15 TP. I don't know. The next segment is going to be about near future hopes regarding Monolith Soft. Now, I already did a prediction video for Monolith Soft about this year. I laugh because it immediately became outdated because that video was just based on the idea that the Switch 2 would come out this year. And then a week after, reports came out that it wasn't. So, yeah, it's that was an L on my part. However, that video does exist, so I don't want this segment to go on too long. I will mention a few ideas. Everybody wants a Xenoblade Warriors. I made a video about that by itself. All I will say is that if it does happen, I'll get into it. How could I not? I'm a Xenoblade and a Musou fan. I personally still believe that there's a chance for Xenosaga remasters because they remastered freaking Baten Kaitos 1 and 2. You know, like, if you're gonna bring back Baten Kaitos of all things, it'd be kind of weird if you didn't bring back Xenosagas, which is way more relevant these days. Now, granted, Xenosaga would require more work. I haven't played them, but I to my understanding, like, each game is, like, different in terms of maybe not the exact engine, but, like, the graphics and stuff. You know, it would just take a lot more. It just seems like something that they at least have to be working on. Again, they brought back Baten Kaitos. Also, I should get out of the way, no, I do not think Xenoblade X is being ported or remastered in the near future. Well, depends what you mean by near. Like, if you mean, like, by the end of 2025, no, I don't believe that. To be completely honest, and I'm sorry to burst anybody's bubble, but I honestly think it's more likely, instead what they'll do is, like, just take ideas from X, like, they see the demand for it. They take ideas from X, and then they just put in Xenoblade 4. You know, I honestly feel like that's more likely. If you did watch my predictions video, my hottest take was that my actual true prediction regarding the first Xenoblade game to release would be Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition. There's just a lot of things I could talk about. Maybe I'll make its own separate video, because there has been new elements as to why I believe that. Particularly the art book. I know I did not make that much of a discussion or that big of a deal about the art book. I'm not going to spoil anything in case you haven't played all the games, but there's like this part about a sword which like blew everybody's minds, and it blew mine at first too. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't really change anything though. Like, nothing actually changed. It's just like a cool fun fact, I guess. But yeah, part of that art book though does feed into why I think a Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition would be more likely than it was when I first mentioned the idea. Now let's move on to the final segment of this video, and that is the distant future. You know, maybe not gonna be anything coming out next year, but they did put out that job recruitment page or whatever that was. Like, they basically announced that they were making a new game without like actually announcing it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like a Nintendo Direct announcement. It was kind of divided. Like, some people were like, oh, this is definitely a new IP. Other people were like, oh, this is definitely a new Xenoblade. So I don't know. I felt like I was like kind of being gaslit, because I was reading the thing and it just didn't feel like it was one way or the other. One thing I do want to get across though is some people are still holding on to that dream about that medieval concept art that Monolith Soft put out a couple years ago. It's been a long time. And I'm not saying it's not gonna happen. What I remembered recently, back even further, I think around the time that Xenoblade X came out, they also had a concept art, an area that looked like it would be from Baten Kaitos. And I remember seeing that when I was younger. I was thinking to myself, oh my god, are they gonna bring back Baten Kaitos? Is it gonna have Baten Kaitos 3 or Baten Kaitos HD? I mean, the HD kind of happens. They got ported, but you know, that art didn't really result in anything. It is what it is. It's concept art. One quote that I found recently that I thought was really intriguing. They've thrown a lot of ideas at Nintendo, but the only ones they keep approving are the Xenoblade games. That was a while ago, so things may have changed now. But if that is still true today, if Nintendo still looks at them as the Zelda support group and the Xenoblade company, I think that would be a shame, because as much as I love Xenoblade, I think it'd be a shame if you have a company like Monolith Soft that has so much talent, and they've only been growing bigger and bigger throughout the years, especially if you compare it back to when Xenoblade 2 came out. You know, in the past 7 years, they've been growing so much. It'd be a shame if they were just doing the same things they were always doing. Like, I think they should be allowed to expand and into other projects of their own. And like, one of the reasons why I'm not to brag, it's gonna sound like a brag, but one of the reasons why I'm so open-minded when it comes to games changing or developers making different games is because I always think about from the developer's point of view. Any sort of creator, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over, that gets boring. It kind of saps away your passion, you know? You should be allowed to work on other stuff, to express your passion, your creativity in other ways, because otherwise you're just going to get burnt out or uninspired. To bring it back to Xenoblade 4, it seems like Takahashi has stated that that's going to be different in some way. Like, I've seen some disputes. Like, I'm pretty sure, at least in my memory, the original quote was referring to the music and or the presentation. But some people have interpreted that quote, maybe correctly, I'm not sure. It might have been a mistranslation, you know, things, you know, between Japanese and English translations, especially if it was machine translation. Honestly, I think Xenoblade 4 will be different, regardless, like I said before. I think if we're closing the book with Future Redeemed, then yeah, I would expect Xenoblade 4 to be different. I also made a video about the ways Xenoblade might change. It did not go well. That is a video that I took down, not because I don't believe in what I said, but I just feel like I didn't convey it well. It just seemed like a lot of people, they didn't really listen to what I had to say. They were just upset at the mere premise, the mere suggestion, the mere proposal that Xenoblade would change. So that's why I say, hey, discourse will be inevitable with Xenoblade 4. I forgot to mention this, by the way. No matter what happens, I really hope the Xenoblade trilogy that's on the Switch right now gets a nice upgrade from Switch 2. I'm not saying it has to be a remaster. PS5, you can put in some PS4 games. Well, a lot of them, not just some. And you get a nice boost. That's what I hope. Now, that might be too much to ask, considering it's Nintendo. And the Xenoblade games still cost a lot of money after all these years. It might be too much to ask, but it would just be nice. Because I would love to revisit these games on Switch 2, looking better, running better especially, better resolution on handheld. Just the thought of a Xenoblade game, a new Xenoblade game on the Switch 2. Like, think of what they could accomplish. You know, I'm not saying Switch 2 is going to be cutting edge technology. Of course it won't be, but compared to Switch 1, Switch 1 was, well, it is 7-year-old hardware that was already outdated when it initially released. I'll admit, sometimes I overlook that because I'm just used to, you know, all those games being similar in how they look and how they run. But Xenoblade 4 or new IP could really change that. We could speculate about that all day. We really could. That's a pretty fun topic just to imagine what that would be like, right? But I just want to give a little bit of a tribute to Monolith Soft. A definitely gracious thank you to working on all these games that I cherish, and all the other games that are older that I didn't play that I really want to play. Hopefully they get ported. You know, I just love Xenoblade, and I love talking about Xenoblade. I'm glad that I found the excuse to get on this camera and do that again. And just knowing that Monolith Soft is 25 years old, it's like not that far off from my age. You know, it's kind of like we're family. It's kind of like it's kind of like they've been there for me. You know, it's like two peas in a pod, like fraternal twins. It's just this deep connection that I can't explain. And you might be saying, Nara, what the fuck are you talking about? Has this video gone off the rails? Yes, it has. It's 3 a.m. How did you expect it not to be? That was my excuse to talk about Xenoblade Monolith Soft for its 25th anniversary, its 25th birthday. Tetsuya Takahashi has consumed alcohol for a minimum of 4 years, guys. And I think that's awesome. I think that's great. I ain't gonna promise any more videos soon, but just know I'm here, and I love Xenoblade. and The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom.